I don't know if you've ever been called the greatest something. You know, maybe it was at school, you were the number one sports person, or you were the most voted to be successful outside of school, or maybe you're the one who needs the most deodorant. Whatever it is, you know, we all like to have something, well, maybe not the last one, about the most or the greatest. But it does come with a fair bit of responsibility, especially when others are labelling it on you in a very heavy, serious way. We're going to have a chat today to a man who has been regarded by many as the greatest detective that Australia has ever had. That is a pretty lofty title to be put on somebody. He's a homicide detective. He's seen a lot of things that none of us wish to see. There's a lot we can learn from him, the way he approaches life, the way he stays on mission, as it were, of knowing the why of what he's doing. We're going to hear from Ron Iddles in just a moment. As we mentioned, arguably, I don't think he would say it, Australia's greatest ever detective. Just before we get there, if you love this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, follow it, share it with friends? Just one friend even. Hey, this is a great one. I'd love you to listen to this. We do that because, for us, it's always free, these podcasts. We're just trying to get the word out as far as we can to make sure that people are connected to the podcast and connected to stories that can help them change their lives for the better. That's the aim of it. So doing all those things we mentioned, rating, reviewing, sharing, following, all that sort of stuff, just helps all the algorithms do that, and we'd love the word to get out a bit further. All right, let's get stuck into this interview with Ron Iddles. Ron, thank you so much for your time.
And it's great to be with you finally.
Good on you, Ron. Let's talk a bit about why you got into the Police Association in the first place. Was it always something as a kid that you wanted to be a copper?
Look, I got into the police force, I think, initially growing up in the country on a farm. And I've said it before, I watched the original Homicide version with Leonard Teal and Jack Fagan in it, and it fascinated me how they could solve a murder in an hour. So eventually in 1973 I came to Melbourne and joined the police force, and by 1980 I'd made it to the homicide squad.
There you go. Now, did you ever solve a case in 1 hour, Ron? That's what I need to know now.
Oh, no, I don't think you solve them in an hour, but there are some where we'd apprehended the offender in an hour.
That's incredible.
But the reality is, I think the first 48 hours, 72 hours was always the tough time to make sure you're going in a particular direction.
Yeah. Take me through a bit of, life in homicide. It's where, wrong words, so forgive me for it, but that's where your name's been made, as it were. You've been regarded by many, I've done a lot of reading about you over time, and obviously you do appear in the media over recent years as well, that you're regarded as somebody who is very, very tough but very fair, respects people as well, whether they're actually on whichever side of the criminal aspect they might be on, a victim's family, but you respect someone who perhaps is going through that system and facing justice as well. As you go through, what's your philosophy, I suppose, as you look at your job?
I think I've always treated everyone fairly, and that's regardless of whether they're an accused person or whether they're witnesses or might be family of victims. And I think in relation to accused persons, predominantly I've had a simple philosophy, and that is they're no different than you and I. They've just made bad choices in life. And, I've interviewed probably over 300 people in relation to the offence of murder, but out of those, there would only be half a dozen who I would say were bad. The rest are just like you and I, and for whatever reasons, and most times there's some social reason, they've got themselves involved and ended up killing someone.
Ron, that's quite a remarkable understanding to have. You've said 300 people, 300 murders you've investigated, and to still have this understanding that you think people have that, most of them are actually pretty good. I mean, it's just some remarkable strength in yourself to be able to keep doing. I'm sure you would have had opportunities over time to just go, oh, everyone, just this whole world seems to it's going to hell in the handbasket.
I think when you deal with things which are negative all the time, and I think there was a period probably after about 10 years of homicide work that I changed in relation to my own family. I didn't want them going out at night, and you started to put up a bit of a fence around. And then it's a matter of readjusting and thinking, well, hang on a minute, most of the people I've dealt with aren't that bad. And as I say, they've made bad choices. And what I always found is there were two things that you could give them that cost nothing. One is the ability to listen to them, and the second thing was the ability to understand the situation they're in and actually show them some genuine empathy. And if you did that 9 times out of 10, they told you the story.
I'm led to believe also that you've got one of your theories is you always start by, when you sit down with someone, you just start straight out by asking them, did you do it too? It's sort of a way to start it from there. Is that true?
Look, a lot of the times that is true. If I was going to interview someone, you might you just get a little bit of background first and then say, I'm going to interview you about the circumstances surrounding the death of Bill Smith. Now, tell me what happened tonight, or did you do it? Now, people don't like to lie. It causes stress and anxiety, but I've travelled around the world, and I think in about 87% of interviews that are conducted, quite often the direct question's not asked. Did you do it?
It's remarkable that that's not actually what it is. I mean, it must lead you, actually open up some doors, even if they're covering up a lie, that it gives you a hint to run down and chase something down, perhaps.
Well, the first thing is if the person turns around to me and says, I don't know what you're talking about, or I didn't do it, then it's just pretty simple. You move to the next thing, which is, okay, I want you to tell me everywhere you were between point A and point B in time. And then it's about, I guess, getting a commitment from and locking them into their story. And then basically you just work on disproving the story, or if you've got facts which dispute it, eventually you put the facts to them.
Ron, I'm wondering, I sort of, as I've read about your story and obviously knew I had this opportunity to have a chat to you today, I put myself as much as I could into your shoes. And the thing that sort of, touched me so much was I went, I don't know how I could keep going with my family. I think that it would be really hard for me to separate work and life sometimes, to separate some of the bad things that do happen, even if they are by good people, and to be able to just actually have that bit of hope in life, have that bit of positivity in life, and have some, I suppose, some real zest and positivity within myself as well. Is there a trick for you that you do it? Is it just the way you were brought up in the country, and that's just, we're harder in the country, that's the sort of idea, or is it something you've had to work at?
I think I've had to work at it. I don't think you can go out and deal with death nearly every day of your working life and then just go home and switch off or think that doesn't exist. So it was something I think that I had to work at, and I got to the stage where once I drove basically home and pulled in the driveway, to a certain extent that was it. But I think I've had a supportive wife, for nearly 40 years. And, I might have been out for 2 or 3 nights and not home, and she would always say, oh, well, tell me about the job. So you sit down and you have that fairly open discussion. And I think it's that release and having the support from your family unit which actually helps you.
Absolutely. What about for the next question I put myself in, as I sort of tried to put myself in your shoes as best I could, was how did your kids cope? You mentioned this for you, we got a bit fearful for the kids. You didn't want them going outside the family, that sort of thing. How did they cope with Dad, potentially having to be on the phone in the middle of the night and knowing the work that you had to do? How did they actually go through and I suppose grow up through that?
Good question. I guess my oldest daughter, I was told I built the sandpit, but I didn't play in the sandpit.
Right.
So early days it was about, working hard and establishing a career.
Yep.
And, there were times when I was never home. I could be gone for a week. I think that was hard on them. But as time went on, it became, you tried to balance all that.
Yeah.
And, you could talk to any of my 3 kids and, if the phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning, I always went out in the kitchen. The bedrooms weren't far away. And, Colleen, my wife, would say, oh, Matthew heard you last night. You're going to a shooting or you're going somewhere. And they just knew that was life, that Dad packed up and away he went.
Yeah. How do they cope with that now, I suppose? How is it, when I think they're adults now, most of your kids, or certainly, definitely living independently in that regards. What's the relationship like there? Have they shared with you a bit more of what what life was like and what it means for them, the fact that you have done so much good in this world?
I think that's the other side of the coin of it. They've all grown up, and as you said, they're adults now. And my wife's kept a scrapbook of nearly every homicide that I've been to, so they're able to look at that, reflect on that, and see the good work that I've done for the community. And, they're appreciative of that. I still do some public speaking, and they quite often come to those nights to hear some of the stories I've got to share.
One of the things that, I, as I read a bit about your story too, Ron, was that I think there was one case in particular where there was enough evidence to arrest somebody, you arrested them, and then you had this sort of niggling feeling that maybe this wasn't quite right. And you actually went about and started just realising and actually went the full way to disprove that this person actually hadn't done it anymore. It takes someone big to admit that they're wrong. First of all, could you explain a bit of the relief that you felt? And I suppose was it ever frowned upon by others that no, hold on, if we made an arrest, we hang tough together and we say that's what we're going to do?
No, I don't think it was frowned upon. I built myself a reputation of being honest, fair, and I had credibility. But when I charged this person, it was to do with the murder of a man by the name of Tom Seck, who was the security guard killed outside Casablanca's in Cranbourne. And I interviewed this person and he said he didn't do it. But I had sufficient evidence from some eyewitnesses which indicated the contrary. So he was ultimately charged and remanded in custody. I think after about 10 days I went and saw him and he said, Ron, I'll tell you now, I didn't do it. Now, the way this person sort of protested, I thought, you know what, I got a niggling doubt. But so I shook his hand and I said, if you get committed for trial, and I think at the end of that process, after the committal, there's some doubt about it, you won't stand your trial. So he was committed for trial, and I started to doubt it. Then I went out and I guess I disproved the account that was given by the witness, and I went to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the charge was withdrawn, and ultimately there was an inquest where the both of us shake hands outside the inquest, and for him life goes on.
I want to talk...
But for me, personally, that was a big relief. For about 18 months, you've got this niggling doubt. Have I charged the wrong person? And I had that doubt, but then on the other side of it, you look at your witnesses and you look at some of the evidence and you think, well, hang on a minute, the court's actually sent him for trial, so magistrates heard all the evidence. He's satisfied that there's evidence there for a jury to come to a decision. So it became a pretty big thing after that. But in the end, I think I probably worked harder to prove his innocence than I did to prove his guilt, and I'm satisfied he didn't do it.
Yeah. I think that's only more respect to you from so many quarters, Ron, as well, that you do work hard to find the truth as much as we can and in everything that you do, which is a remarkable thing. I want to talk a bit about where you are in just a couple of minutes at the moment, because you have actually changed out of homicide. But before we sort of just move off that, I want to ask two questions, and they're sort of polar opposites of each other. The best thing you think you've done in the force up until now? Is there one moment that you could, or maybe it's a theme around that? And is there a regret at all that you have as you look back at your 20, 30 years that you've served in the force?
I think one of the things that I would like to see as my legacy is probably over the last 8 years, I've changed the way in which predominantly a lot of detectives conduct interviews. I've been fortunate enough to go to Canada and the UK and study interview techniques, and I came back here and developed an interview style which was really conversationalist rather than having a table and having a barrier. So I think that's worked very well. So I'd like to think that as a positive. And a negative, I guess, is, there's been a couple of murders that I would have loved to have solved. One of the first ones was Thomas Cooper, who was shot down at Ricker Points in August 1980. We still did some work on that 2 months ago, but, sadly, I didn't get there even 34 years on.
Just as we wrap up, I want to also ask, you're brought up in the country, a dad who's involved pretty heavily in the church. You brought up in that Christian life. We're obviously a Christian-based radio station. What role does faith actually play in your life as you go about the work that you do?
Oh, look, I think I always say there's three things you got to be. There's physical, emotional, and spiritual. And for some people, spiritual can mean, I think, many things. It's about believing in something, but I was brought up in the Christian faith. So for me, it's always about looking after people. It's about being truthful. It's being about honest. It's being about true to myself. I don't go out there and, preach the word or do anything like that, but I think it's the way in which I operate that people can see that maybe I'm a little bit different. Yeah.
And I'm going to finish with this because you've got one of those unique nicknames that has been given to you, which I'd just love to hear how you respond to it. You've been known in the past as the Great Man. Now, you're respected by victims' families greatly. Some of those people you put away, I know they've got out of jail, they've had a coffee with you. Many parts of the media and within the force as well, they all consider you, to be that great man. It's a nickname that sort of hung around a little bit too. What does it mean when you hear that, when someone sort of refers that to you? What does it do for you as you hear it?
I shudder because I've never wanted to be different than anybody else, right? All I wanted to do is to do a good job. So when colleagues used to call me that, I'd say, listen, just drop off it. I'm part of the team. Yeah. I have an Australian Police Medal, which was given to me Australia Day 2001, but I don't put the initials after my name because it's just the way that I've been. Whilst I respect those who put me up for it, I've always just wanted to be Ron Iddles and not different to anybody else and not put myself on a pedestal.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, you've served not only the police force, not only the victims and the victims' families well. You've served, indeed, our entire community so well for many, many years. We really appreciate you being so honest about your journey, what it means for your family, for yourself, and your hopes and your dreams for the future as well. Thank you so much for taking the time that you've given us to share with us tonight and just give us a bit of an insight into your life and your role.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for that.
My guest on Towards Understanding, Ron Iddles.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.